Worth friends. I am so grateful to be with you today, to be sharing this message that I am in the process of always learning. If you look at the title of this message today, it's titled Letting Go and Letting God. Specifically, I want to share some thoughts about that with regards to parenting. I think I'm a mother, I'm not a father, but if men are watching this Women of Worth message, which we have a lot of male support for this show, and a lot of male support for High Five Life. So I want to make sure you always know we love you joining us. But Women of Worth, the messages that I pray and share and then invite guests to share really are to support women and what we are facing. So if you are studying Come Follow Me this week, and if you've watched this week's episode of my Real Talk Come Follow Me show with my co-host Scott Sorensen, you know already that this is the week in Come Follow Me where Lehi has his vision. And I shared on Real Talk, I don't want to regurgitate what I've already shared there, but the thought of every time I study Lehi, I am overwhelmed with the idea that he was shown his boys, Laman and Lemuel, struggling. He was shown Nephi and Sam being obedient. And he was shown this, and it affected how he parented. He was calling out to them. He kept inviting them. He kept giving them priesthood blessings. He kept hoping that they would grasp the fruit of the tree and live a gospel-focused life. And I have pondered and prayed, and this is what I shared on Real Talk, and not what I'm going to specifically focus on Lehi today, but on Hannah. What do we do as parents when we are clearly aware of maybe the struggles of our kids, and we've maybe even spiritually been shown how things may turn out? How do we stay in faith and hope? How do we keep inviting them? But more than that, how did Lehi and Hannah, who I want to talk about today, how did they parent when the family dynamics were not ideal? And that's where this title, Letting Go and Letting God, came from. Because I believe in all areas of our lives, we are in a constant balance of agency in our choice, and then surrender and grace in allowing the Lord to direct our lives. And that's a process that I'm always learning. A few years ago, I wrote this little booklet called Mother to Mother, and it was published by Covenant. You may have seen it, or you may have a copy of it. And I talk about women in the scriptures and kind of maybe the untold stories of what they experienced. Nephi's wife, the stripling warrior mothers, and what they may be like, not their perfect Pinterest life that we think when we read the scriptures about them. One of the women I talked about, one of the women of worth in this book that I love, is Hannah. And I talk about her journey with infertility and her conversation with her bishop, the high priest Eli. And he thought she was drunk or bitter, and she was dealing with infertility. And I too have had that experience, and many of our women of worth viewers have had that journey. One of the parts of Hannah's story that I love is she helps, through her vulnerability, teach her priesthood leader more about infertility. That's how I read the scriptures, and that's what I talk about in this booklet. The other part of this story that I love is it's faith promoting if you're dealing with infertility. But today, the message is much like Lehi. How did Hannah continue to be the mother to this baby that she had prayed for and fasted for? And then Samuel was then going to go live. She had promised God she was going to let him go live in the temple. How do you parent when the family dynamics don't look the way you think? Whether it's like Lehi, where your children are in rebellion and they're pushing away from you and from the gospel, and it's still something you value. Whether it's infertility and you can't have a baby and you're struggling with that, how do you keep your mother heart alive like Hannah did? Or like Hannah, how do you parent when you have to let your kid go? She literally physically could not raise her child after she had fasted and prayed and received a blessing from the bishop. Eli, and she had promised God to let him go. Now, one part of this story that is just, if you read too fast, I love to be a little investigator of the scriptures. If you read too fast, you'll miss it. But she was actually given the opportunity once a year. It makes me cry. Once a year, 1 Samuel 2:19. The scriptures say that Hannah was making a little coat for her son from year to year. Don't you just feel your heart break for that? But isn't that such a beautiful example? Now, we don't have a full record of what else she did. I'm sure she prayed and fasted. She couldn't text him. She couldn't FaceTime him. She couldn't email the prophet and say, how's my boy doing? They couldn't send pictures back and forth and post on social media so they knew, like we often get when our kids go off to serve full-time missions or go into the military, where we can still communicate with them. We don't know how close she lived to the temple, but the scriptures say once a year she made a little coat for him. What a tender example of the Lord's awareness of us as mothers and as women. And more than anything, what I wanted to share is I love Hannah's example. I'm sure that was a painful separation. I'm sure she wished at times that she could throw birthday parties, teach her son to read, make him peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and he was gone from her. She had let him go to serve the Lord. But she, through the direction of the Spirit, found a way to mother him. And the way that she mothered him, to me, is an example of surrender and grace. She made him a little coat every year. And then on their yearly visit, she would take him this coat. So if you find yourself in a situation right now I am parenting a brand new 16-year-old daughter who just turned 16 yesterday, and a 22-year-old return missionary son who's been home a year from his mission, who is not married at this point. And I have found myself, I've talked to my other middle-aged friends, I'm almost 50, and I am often on my knees pleading with God to have him tutor me on how I parent in this new stage. I don't feel like it looks the same. And I feel like there's a ton of resources out there on potty training and teaching your kids to read and parenting young kids and Facebook groups to help you. But as parents, we stop talking to each other when our kids are teens or when they're young and single and adults. And it's a confusing time. I've had recently some really heartbreaking conversations with friends that we're all coming to the table vulnerable because we don't know, are we doing enough? Or like Lehi, you have children that are now adults that you prayed for, that you did the family home evenings, you did scouting, you did personal progress. They may have served missions and then got married in the temple, and now they've left the church, or they've left their faith in a way that feels very rejecting to you. And like Laman and Lemuel, maybe you have children that are openly rebelling and your kids are fighting against each other, and you're like, I don't know how to be a parent. And you're thinking parenting only looks like this. It looks like these perfect family gatherings where everyone's matched for Easter and everyone's doing come follow me perfectly, and you're having these spiritual conversations, or all your kids are grown and married in the temple and their faith is strong. And you're thinking, I've messed up because everyone else has that family. And yet my family looks very different. I want today's message to be validation for you. I'm going to invite you to go to the Lord, petition him, and pray to be directed for the little coats that you can do to mother or father your children in a way that is perfect for them, because Hannah knew Samuel needed to serve this mission. And so Hannah was going to mother within the context the Lord had set up for Samuel's curriculum. And the same can be said to our rebellious children, our kids that may be in prison, our kids that may be drug addicts, our kids that are struggling because they have a learning disability or anxiety or depression, and you do not know how to parent them. I want you to know today at Women of Worth that I see you and I hear you. That Lehi this week in Come Follow Me understands, as his heart in all tenderness, it says, calls out loudly to his boys to partake of the fruit. And yet he, as the prophet, knew how it was going to end. And yet he kept inviting. He kept loving. He kept trying to see their ideal perspective in their goals and potential, even though they were living way, way, way below it. My invitation is that we remain hopeful, that we petition the Lord to teach us through the Spirit every day for our unique families, our unique children. We are not the same people parenting, and we're not parenting clones of our neighbors' kids. And so God knows our curriculum is going to be set up very uniquely for our families. Maybe for your family, that includes addiction, depression, same-sex attraction, maybe infertility, maybe adoption, maybe divorce, maybe single, never married, and you're watching Women of Worth and you're thinking, well, you're not even talking to me because I haven't even had kids yet. But your mother heart is still alive in there. Your mother heart is trying to stay hopeful like Hannah's. I invite you to pray to the Lord and ask him and show you through the Spirit each day how you can sew those little coats for maybe your primary class, your nieces and nephews, your neighbors. God knows our heartbreak. He knew Hannah's. Eli, her bishop, didn't understand. But instead of getting offended, I write about it in this booklet, Hannah doesn't get mad that the bishop is insensitive and makes a rude comment about calling her drunk when she's crying about this heartbreak of infertility. She teaches him. She shares her vulnerability with him. And I believe, reading through the scriptures with the Spirit, my eyes were able to see that this bishop learned from that. So that is my message for today. I am so grateful for a Heavenly Father that knows me. He knows what I have to learn as a mom. And so he has given me children that have strengths and weaknesses that trigger my stuff. And through parenting, I've been able to become more like my Heavenly Father, because sometimes I'm on my knees and I've messed it up and I don't know how to reach my kids, and I feel like I'm the least equipped to be their mother. They needed a different kind of mom and I'm not that mom. I know that he knows them and he loves them, and he's also knowing me and loving me, and together he's trying to help it all match up. And so he's allowing us to have heartbreak and hurt and disappointment in our families because his kids aren't perfect. And so if we're really going to become parents like our heavenly parents, our heavenly mother, our heavenly Father have learned about unconditional love, about boundaries, about inviting, about consistency, about forgiveness. And that is what they're wanting us to learn. And so my invitation is, if you're raising a Layman and Lemuel, pray to know how to make the little coat for them. If you're dealing with infertility and you're struggling to remain hopeful, I pray that you will feel the spirit of this message today. And if you have a child that you've had to let go because they're serving in the military or the mission field or somewhere far away, and your heart's hurting and breaking because you don't know how to be there for them because they're struggling, or because they're gone physically from you, I pray that you will know that fasting and prayer is mighty mothering. And my invitation to you today is, please share this with someone else. Parents everywhere are privately struggling, and it looks like we all have it figured out and that our kids are on the fast track to the celestial kingdom and there's no worries, and they all have full ride scholarships to Harvard and they're going to all be doctors and married in the temple. But the truth is, it's tough. And here at Women of Worth and at High Five Live, we try to share messages that help inspire that hope that I believe Hannah showed. And she used it to get through infertility, and then she used it when her baby was gone and she could only see him once a year. So 1 Samuel 2:19, if you want to read that one little verse about the little coat she made for him, I think it's such a tender example of the Lord's awareness of women of great worth, and our unique contributions to our ward families and our individual families and our communities. And so I'm grateful to be associated with so many great women of worth here on High Five Live. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you again next week.